Thinking about going to Home Depot and buying some of that paint from Dave the Paint Guy. Nice deal. Anyways, I was expecting Jaquetta to be on, but that's okay. I'm sure Pat's aware of this, but we're excited. We're starting a monthly virtual fair for participants to line up and connect with landlords. We're doing about 12 landlords at a time for an hour. Each landlord will have a set amount of time. There'll be a PowerPoint presentation running in the background of pictures of the property. He or she can explain the properties, explain, sell themselves. So currently we have about 250 participants looking for housing. So we're hoping we can get these numbers down and, get people housed. Maybe we won't have a virtual housing fair, but we're hoping we can continue this. So if there's any other Section 8 landlords on site or anyone who's interested in Section 8, we're really trying to make that connection without steering anybody as HUD does not like. So we're excited about that. We found out that some of the funding from the Biden administration has been released to help landlords with back rent. I don't have the exact details. I'm pretty sure the city's going to be administering some of those funds, some of the charities in county. So that might be an asset for you guys if you're struggling with back rent. It does not have the stipulation, I believe, as the previous stimulus program that you had to be suffering from a job loss. I think that has been taken out of this new one. So it's definitely, I don't know if it's going to be a one-time thing or an X amount of dollars. I don't have that information, but helping the landlords out is something to do some research and look into. So I'm not sure if Jaquetta's on. She might have some other comments. I do not see her, but we're excited to keep going here. We're hoping to keep the mass evictions to a minimum once COVID leaves us. But if anybody ever needs anything, feel free to reach out to me. I can associate you with the right people here at the Housing Authority if it's not my end. But thank you, Pat, as usual.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. And before we move on, I just got some information yesterday about the funding that's coming our way. Apparently the city has a little more than $6 million and Monroe County is going to get around $16 million. So as soon as March 11th, that program is going to come our way where they're going to start distributing the funds. And I think the Catholic Family Charities are going to be in charge of that. All right. And like Mark said, the stipulations are a little bit less. Landlords can initiate the process, but you're going to need some sort of cooperation with your tenants as well. Okay, at least a signature, if not more. So I know it's frustrating for those of you that have tenants that are thousands of dollars behind, but try to keep that communication open with them. I found it doesn't do any good for me to get really upset and, because they'll just shut the door and stop communicating with you. So help is on the way. And hopefully with your tenants that were challenging in the past, they'll be more open to it now because there is a lot of funds, and apparently this 22 million grouped together between the county and the city all has to be spent, I'm hearing by September. So that's like 3 million a month, give or take a little bit. So there's going to be a big rush for it. I don't know how well organized CFC is going to be. So, but just plan and prepare it. And I guess when this comes out, we'll know more. Okay, so at least that's a good sign that money is coming. Bob, did you want to say a few words before we start our topic?
Yeah. So I guess with respect to that, Pat, I was on a webinar with a guy named Jeff Watson, and this was just maybe 2 weeks ago as the states were getting funded from the feds with millions of dollars that were going to trickle down. And I'm glad that you've been a part of that process there locally. And they were suggesting that we start getting packages together with respect to our troubled tenants. And I don't know if this was suggested at all, with regards to what you've heard, but I wrote down some things here, with regards to what this packet might look like, just to be prepared. Would be the written rental agreement, payment history, all your notices to pay or quit, tenant income information, preference at the 50%, median income threshold, proof of 90+ days out of work if available, any type of unemployment documentation, again, if available or if applicable. Any kind of notices were sent to tenant regarding rent, and then proof of ownership of the property. So that was kind of a sort of a quick checklist, if you will, of documents to be trying to be prepared for perhaps once these things launch. But the other stuff that I was going to talk about just real briefly was just to get kind of a feel for people who have applied for these other federal programs, and if not, just make people aware of them, I guess. And that first one, of course, is the second round of the PPP, and the big eligibility factor there being that you've got to demonstrate that your revenues were 25% below in 2020 what they were in 2019, and they're looking at it from a quarterly basis, and they're looking at covered periods of between 8 and 24 weeks. So real simply what that means in our particular case, we were able to qualify for first quarter, but we were not able to qualify for the other 3 quarters because our losses did not exceed the 25% threshold. We had losses, but they weren't in that range, so we couldn't be covered. So that's that particular program. Certainly encourage people to look into that. With that program, and if you did the first PPP program last year, you're going to work with your lender with that, which is typically your banker, and you're going to work with the same person. If you haven't done either program and want to get that ball started, the best way to do that is with your banking relationship. Check with your local bank, their website, and try to get connected that way. Second program, which again, people may or may not have taken advantage of last year, was the EIDL program, which was that emergency disaster loan that was up to $10,000. And that was sort of on a basis of per employee. So Pat, I think in your case, you probably got the maximum amount, but in my case, I only had 1 employee, so I only got $1,000. Now this year, I'm able to apply for the remaining $9,000 if I have a 30% loss that I can demonstrate, again, over a certain period of time. So again, in my case, I meet the qualifications for this. Hopefully going to be eligible for the other $9,000, and that was just announced last week. Now, if you did that before, you're going to use the same application, and that also, again, this is coming directly from the SBA. This is not through your banker. So folks that haven't done this last year, maybe we can talk about this more offline or if there's more questions, but basically, long story short, it's a program in which you can apply for up to $10,000. Could be a forgivable grant, but you're going to have to meet certain criteria. I want to talk about 2 other ones real quick. For those that have tenants like in the restaurant business or the hotel business, they're coming out with this SVOG grant. Again, this is all kind of part of the Small Business Administration. And I'm also going to give you guys some websites too, just if you want to check into any of this SBA stuff further. And Pat, I'll be just maybe another minute or two. But that's going to be specifically targeted to all those venues, restaurants, people in the arts and entertainment businesses that have been, severely hit by COVID and had to shut down, and of course, severe loss of revenues, et cetera. Final thing to just talk about from there is just on the local level, and this is something that went on last year, but it was the business emergency grant that was being offered from the city. And this actually took 2 different rounds last year, and then this year they have yet another round of it. So long story short, last year you were able to get up to $5,000 with this grant, and it was first grant was like $3,000, second grant was $2,000, and then this year you're able to get an additional $3,000 for a maximum of $8,000 per business. It is an application process. You do have to demonstrate loss, and with this particular program, which I thought was kind of cool, at least for me, is this program helped me with mortgage payments on Independence, which is our headquarters property, and also helped me with an insurance bill this year for that property. So in other words, it looked at areas that these other grants and things like that were not covering, and again, where you could demonstrate, severe loss and shortfall in terms of revenues, like year over year. So that information should be available on the city's website if you type in Business Emergency Assistance Grant, and again, follow the application procedure. You'll probably be dealing with a guy named Thad Schofield, who is heading this up and has been very good to work with. So again, just sort of some encouragement that way. And just before I leave, let me give you some of those SBA websites too, if anybody wants to check out that stuff. So SBA.gov. First one is / coronavirus relief. SBA.gov / PPP. SBA.gov / disaster. SBA.gov / updates. SBA.gov / local -assistance. And finally, SBA.gov SVOG grant. So just some things there. And Pat, other than that, I don't know if there's questions or discussion we want to have with it, but I know you've got other things on the agenda, so I didn't want to take up a lot of time.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bob. Thank you. And thanks for doing the research on that, because there's probably a few of us that definitely took advantage of those programs, but very helpful for sure. Before we start with how to do a good application, how to do a good review of somebody, Mark, you want to say something real quick? Mantione?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Pat, we still are offering landlord incentives here at the Housing Authority for landlords that are involved in the Section 8 program. We have increased it slightly. We're allowing up to 12 12 incentives per category. It was 5, so we are trying to spend the money. So, and it has been extended to the end of June at this point. It may be extended again. So some landlords have already reached that 5. I've been reaching out to them. I think you're pretty close too. So,
So I can't get them from plenty of locations.
continue sending them in. So, once again, we're working really hard to try to keep landlords in this business, moving forward with the least amount of loss. So thank you guys. And, thank you, Pat.
All right. Thank you very much. Oh, go ahead.
Pat, could Mark, could you just summarize for us what incentives are going on right now, just for the new people as well as some of the old timers with
Yeah, sure.
respect to Section 8?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
First and foremost, we're offering pretty much a no-brainer. If you lease up a Section 8 participant, whether you're an existing landlord or new landlord, we're paying $500 to an existing landlord just to say, yeah, here, I'm gonna rent this to you, $1,000 for a new landlord. So that's pretty much a no-brainer. You're doing that paperwork anyways. Some units do qualify for some help with rehab expenses. I know we've prepped people in the past to make sure units are as closely ready to pass, but the program was designed for a landlord that may say, hey, I'm not going to put $1,000 into this unit. I'm owed $10,000 and I don't want to put another grand out and get this unit ready. I'd rather have it sit here empty. So that money is for those kind of landlords. So up to $1,000 for that. We help with some lead recovery, about $1,500. Let's say you have a unit that has just completely absorbed and deteriorated paint. The cost can be pretty expensive to get all the clearance, get all the work done. So we're paying up to $1,500 to help with that. We're offering up to $300 for participant responsibility damages. So it doesn't have to be a special inspection. You can call and say, hey, they're damaging my property. We'll go look at it. If there is damage, we'll pay up to $300. It could be in the middle of an annual or biannual inspection. Landlord says, I'm not going to cover this year, Mark. I'm not going to cover this. So too many people owe me money. I'm not going to pay this $200 for this participant. They can't afford it. That's another way of using it. And also a bonus retention. It's pretty much a very simple agreement of a repayment plan, and we will pay $500, $300 for that agreement. Now that agreement does not hold up if they stop paying that rent. If the moratorium's lifted, you still hold the right to take your own legal matters. So there is money out there. We have about $500,000 to spend, and we're still trying to spend it. So if you guys know other Section 8 landlords, please have them contact us. We can email them stuff. We can give them better, more detailed information. But Pat, I know you've taken advantage of it. We had a few, it was a new program and we had a little bit to learn, but I think it's smoothed out pretty well now. Pat's taking advantage of it. So Pat, you're happy with it, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's been real good.
Yeah.
I was going to just endorse Mark to everyone because I think he helped us. We had a little bit of a bumpy start with some of those incentives, and Mark was just awesome to help us out and kind of navigate through the waters, of some of that stuff. So Mark, we appreciate you. You're a great resource.
No problem. Thank you guys. As usual, it's my pleasure to be here.
Hey, Mark, Michelle had a question. She wants to know where you can get the information of the RHA programs.
Yeah, well, she can go on our website. It's there in one of the quick links, I believe. If she navigates through the website, that would be one way of doing it. Or she can email me. I don't know if I have my email address on here, but it's pretty simple. It's just M as in my first initial, Mantione, as it is on the screen, at rochesterhousing.org. I'd be more than willing to send anybody out our press release and some better breakdown of the programs.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Before we start, any general questions on what we've talked about so far? Okay. All right, let's get into it then. Your applicants who are going to be your prospective new tenants. I've been saying this forever. This is the most important part of this whole business. So about us making money, we really need to have a solid tenant. All right. Without the solid tenant, your beautiful home doesn't make a difference at all. Right. So the laws have changed on what we can do, what we can't do, and you really need to be protected. So what Beth and I are going to talk about today is what we do. It may not work for everybody, I want to tell you that when you do put policies in place for your applications and your screening and your background checks, it's always good to make sure that you have someone on your legal side, whether an attorney or someone else that really knows what they're doing. Okay, because if you make a mistake, you just can't say, hey, I made a mistake. Okay, you could have some repercussions for that. So be very careful with your policies and procedures. Make sure it's legit and up, and do what works for you. Okay, again, this works for us, but like this business goes, in 6 months we're going to be doing other things. All right, so what we tell you today will probably change, and that's just because of what's going on out there. All right, so with what Beth's going to talk about, on top of that, I always like to make home visits for the people that you want to select. Okay, they did their application, they've been screened, you want to select them. I always recommend to make an appointment with them to make a 5-10 minute home visit. Okay, because there, if they're going to say, oh, you want to see how I live? Well, yes, I do. I want to know who I'm inheriting, what I'm going to get. Okay, because we know sometimes when people do come in for a brief visit at the office, whether they have to submit paperwork and they're dressed nice and so forth, that may or may not be who you're going to get as a tenant. Okay, so yes, you want to see how they live. It's not like you have to inspect the whole property, but you want to walk in, get a good feel, get a good vibe, look around, and then ask them a few more questions. Do they plan on staying at your place long term? Is it short term? And again, any reasons why they're moving from where they are now. Okay, so you can have some small talk, and while you do your small talk, you can definitely get a good look. When you do those home visits, you should also talk to some neighbors. I love talking to neighbors because I'll ask the neighbors if our tenant to be is a problem. Loud music, animals, 911 calls. I want to get a feel, who we're inheriting again, and I don't want to put a bad egg in our property and upset the neighbors around. Okay, so if you have the time, I would really recommend doing that. All right, do you want to start?
Sure.
Okay, so we're going to get right into the application, the screening, and what we do.
Hi, everyone. I think I know most of you, but my name is Beth Shore. I'm the Director of Operations for Gallagher Property Management, and I actually do all of the screenings. So there's, we change it probably every 3-6 months, depending on what's going on in the world. And especially with the pandemic, we've definitely changed it a lot. So the first thing that we do is we always have tenants obviously apply. Most of them apply online. We actually prefer it online. If you went to our website, you could see all the questions that we ask. It's GallagherPropertyMGMT.com. So basically, we do not accept an application unless it is completed in full. So if you leave out one box, our website is going to kick it back and say, nope, sorry. It's kind of like when you fill out anything online, it tells you when you are missing something. When people come in with written applications and they don't fill in boxes that I need the information, as in how many adults will be living there, how many children, do you have any pets? They only fill out one landlord instead of 2. Those are things that I'll kick back and say it's not a completed application. And what I've found over the years is that if they're giving you kind of a half filled out application, they're probably going to have to pay their rent. So I want everything completed from the beginning. I want 100% of rent paid. That means I want 100% of the papers that I ask for. So if you actually go on our website, you can see kind of what we have found works for us as far as the amount of income that we need, what paperwork we require. So we have a non-refundable $20 credit check fee, and it's simply just to pay for the credit check that we run on all applicants. I highly suggest this. I think that a lot of small-time landlords kind of overlook this, but the amount of things that you can find on a credit report speaks volumes that you could never find just doing your own investigation. You can get, hold on, I have my little notes here. You can find out who they owe money to, how many times they've been late. You see their credit score. It lists their criminal history if they have any. It also lists all the places they've lived. So if they have a new address every 6 months on their credit score, something to take into account. And the one that I find useful that I don't think a lot of people look at is you can see where else their credit has been run in the last, I believe, 6 months. So if all of a sudden you're seeing a lot of credit inquiries in the last 6 months, and sometimes it tells you what company has ran that credit, it's kind of something to look at for the full picture.
Yeah, and I'll just butt in because sometimes we'll read that there's 1 or 2 or 3 other property management companies within the last 3 to 5 months. So that should raise a red flag saying what's going on here. So obviously they got denied at that point.
Also, another thing that started probably last month which I found very weird, is people pay their $20 credit check fee online. Application is submitted. 3 days later, their credit check fee gets bounced back. So they didn't even have the $20 to pay the application fee. So you can add that to their overall picture. We do require 4 weeks of pay stubs. You need to look at those pay stubs with a fine-tooth comb. And I can't even stress that enough. You can buy pay stubs online for $9 and fill in the blanks. We've seen that before. I've had friends who've had that happen. And a lot of times it's just a plug and play. So that, let's say they work at Paychex, they Google the Paychex address and fill that in. But their math is not correct. Sometimes they'll say they worked 14 hours, but 40 hours of overtime. You and I both know that's not possible. Their year-to-date income is $40,000 when it's January. So there's a lot of things that you need to look at that you can definitely question and pull out not correct information. So we do require the pay stubs. We require, a DSS budget sheet if they have DSS. Food stamps are within our equation. Any child support they get, SSI, SSD, we do require all those, all the grant letters that they get with that. In my opinion, if they don't provide me with the proof of income, it doesn't exist. So if they say they have more income, well, I do have somebody who, she braids hair for a living, and she sent me her Venmo account for probably over a year. I would take that as income, also her W-2s, that works for me too. But you just have to find a system that works for you. We also require a utility bill, which I feel says a lot. So we tell tenants to take a picture of their RG&E bill. 1, it proves their identity. 2, it proves where they live. So if they say they live on, West Avenue, this is going to prove that they live there because RG&E is in their name. And 3, it also shows you if they're paying their bill or not.
You'll see on the RG&E bill that sometimes they'll take a screenshot and it just says their name, because they don't want you to see what the overdue amount is. Or we'll get it with a whole screenshot and it'll show that they owe $3,000 for RG&E, so, which is good as well.
Obviously, you want their ID also to prove that they are who they are. So those are the things that we do require. Like Pat said, the utility bill is a big one also. And I require at least 2 landlord references. And this is a big one of how I find people lying, is they say they live at, let's say, West Avenue address, and their landlord is Joe Schmo, and they put down Joe Schmo's phone number, I'm sorry. Before I even call Joe Schmo, I go to the city website. I go to the property information tab and I look up that address. Does Joe Schmo own that building or that house? Sometimes they don't, which is fine. My next step is I go one step further and go to the building owner registry tab. So essentially that's the tab on who manages the property. On there is a phone number. I want to make sure that the phone number listed for Joe Schmo is actually who manages that property. And that's the number I call. I don't call the number that they write down. I'm calling the number that's on the city website. So This is where I catch people in a lot of lies because they can put down, their family member, their friend, that they're the landlord when essentially they're not. So when I call a landlord in this case, and the names don't match, I kind of ask more questions as far as, if someone put you down as a landlord reference, do you own the house at blah, blah, blah? And then they'll say yes. And if I notice that it's owned in an LLC, I'll ask one step further. Oh, I see that's not in your personal name. What LLC do you own it in? And this is where I catch people. I find people hang up on me because they don't know the answer. They know they're caught. People make stuff up. I don't remember, which I can take sometimes. But the biggest thing is I need to verify the information that was provided on the application. And if it's not correct, then they're not being truthful.
And what we're finding is, I know Beth just talked really fast, but if you do those steps for folks that live in the city and go on the website and so forth, you take those extra steps and you just get a little creative with your questions about talking to the personal owner, asking about their LLC. I don't know about you, but I think we should remember our LLCs. Okay. But take your time when you go through that before you talk to the person. Do all your homework first and look at everything they provide to you, and then do those checks, okay, to see who is who. And you can kind of tell. I think Beth would agree. Over the last 3 years, this is getting worse and worse and worse. And over those last 3 years, Beth has gotten better herself to ask those good questions because you want them to talk. You don't want to talk too much. You want them to talk. So she'll ask those questions. And then when Beth talks to these supposed landlords and they hesitate so it's, you can kind of tell when someone's full of it. Or for example, if their past rent was $900 a month, I'll say, well, it looks like they've been paying $1,000 a month, right? Is everything good? Oh yeah, everything's good. Yeah, it's $1,000 a month. I mean, so there's so many ways that you can ask questions to pull things out that aren't accurate. Okay, but over the last 3 years, I know Beth has come to me to say, you know what, this is what I'm seeing, X, Y, and Z. I mean, those pay stubs, the fact that you can buy pay stubs, there's different places to go on the internet to get that. I mean, it's incredible. So we really, especially now we really can't evict for another 6 months to a year. It's really important that when you get those pay stubs, you just don't put it part of the file and say, yep, you're all set. Okay. Same thing with with a work supervisor. You want to make sure you talk to a work supervisor because they'll put down, are they full-time? Yes, I'm full-time. Well, you're seasonal. You're full-time now, but you're seasonal. Okay. Or you're part-time. Or you're part-time, but right now you're working full-time hours because the hours are there, but you're part-time. That makes a big difference. What's going to happen in another month or two? Maybe you're going to enter a slow season. So this is the part where you, just like when you're going to buy a house and when you look at the rehab needed, you put a lot of time and effort into selecting the best area for your house. You want to select the best contractors for your house. You want to make sure that the prices are accurate. But for some reason, I think we kind of have a good meeting with an applicant. The application looks good. The meeting goes well with the applicant, and we'll kind of rush that through because we really want to get them in because we're good people. They seem very nice, and let's get them in the house. But as we know, especially for us that have been doing this a long time, nice people don't have to pay rent if they don't want to. Then they won't pay rent. And
I always put it kind of like in a job interview. When you go to your job interview, you are dressed the best, you put on the best impression, but a lot of times that's not who you truly are. You could be somebody at cancer in an office that you know is gossipy, or you could not perform well at your job. So I always feel like when somebody's applying for an apartment, it's kind of like a job interview. They're putting their best foot forward when that may not be truly who they are down the line. So that's why it's important to do your due diligence. Colleen, thank you for answering Greg's question. Greg, when you go to that tab on cityofrochester.gov, the property information, you want to go to the tab, I believe it's the violation tab. I could be wrong, but it's where it lists the violations. And above that will say the building owner registry. And that is who is managing the property if the owner is not managing the property. So that's where you'll find that information.
Yeah, if you're going to check the C of O status, they'll have a property contact number there.
Code enforcement tab. Thank you, Michelle. And then lastly, when I was talking about to verify who owns the property, If you're outside the city limits, you can still do the same thing on monroecounty.gov. Just search county clerk records and then type in the address. You can see who owns the property. Again, it may be in an LLC, but you can still at least verify who owns the property to make sure it matches on the application. Does anyone have any questions about what I just spewed off for 10 minutes? No? Okay.
So
That's awesome information. I just wanted to thank you guys so much. That's got some really good insight into, you know, especially probing deeper into questions and documents, because as you say, things are just so, you know, more difficult now, and to get underneath those lies. And I'm glad you kind of put it that way, because that really helps us too. And I was even going to say, if you can embellish even more on the lies, you know, that you've seen or heard, and Pat, obviously being the detective in your former life, you know, it just puts you guys, I think, in a really special and unique place. And thank you for helping us with this.
oh, it's cool. It's fun. I mean, I think, you know, just at first when you when you do it, you're a little nervous because you're doing the interviewing and what questions do you ask. But the whole thing is when you get the application, make sure it's thorough. If an applicant gives you any pushback, any attitude, thank you very much. Goodbye. You really should go somewhere else. I mean, that's a good thing. If you spot that entitlement, that sassiness during this process, oh my gosh, you're the third person to ask for the same information. You know what? Maybe it's not the right time, or maybe we're not the right place for you. I'm not saying you're a bad person. Maybe we're not the right place for you. And we're not the right place for everybody. So it's okay to go somewhere else. And when that happens, and that does happen to myself, I'm like, thank you very much. We just got rid of a problem before it became a major issue. Okay. So your application is there because the questions you're asking, you want answers to. You don't want it 90% filled out. You want it filled out. Make sure it gets filled out. Same thing.
And one thing I want to jump on what Pat's just said is we have had applicants who are great on paper. I approve them. Everything is fantastic. And then the entitlement comes out before they're signing the lease. We have pulled that back before and said, this is not going to be a good fit. And it has nothing to do with money they make, anything like that. It is, we just know that the relationship is going to be combative. So we're just going to cut that right from there. And you know, it sucks because you put in the time and effort to run applications, you found the best candidate and everything. But at the end of the day, if you're sensing entitlement from the beginning, that's still when they're on their best behavior. So you have to look at that too.
Okay. So on top, oh, go ahead.
Beth and Pat, can you speak to, so you've done all this due diligence, you've said yes to the applicant, and it's 3 months later and the picture is totally bleak, let's say, or it's a year later and the picture is totally bleak. And I know it's a little off topic, but it kind of still goes back to, I guess, you know, the whole tenant screening. Do you have examples perhaps where that's occurred, and have you looked at that and analyzed that and said what you might do differently next time to change things up?
I mean, those things have happened. It's happened where we're doing the lease signing, and even during the lease signing, we tell them to give us at least 20 to 30 minutes. Do not bring your kids, because I want to make sure they understand that lease 100%. No problems, because through experience, 2 months later or 6 months later, you never told me that. I didn't know this. If I flush something down the toilet, I got to pay for it. You mean kids make mistakes? Well, yeah. I mean, we don't pull toys out of toilets for free. It costs me money. And just some of the comments and questions, we try to eliminate that stuff at the lease signing. So how to use a thermostat, just a little nickel and dime stuff we go over at the lease signing. So sometimes it goes south, and we'll give them their security deposit back, first month's rent back, and say, hey, it's time to go. A lot of times they'll agree to that. Sometimes they'll back down and say, no, but you really want to pick up on those cues. And I think years ago, I was still eager and happy and did all this work selecting a tenant. I think we overlooked some of those things. And then we were in a pickle later on because they're in a lease. Okay, so very, very important. Recently, I had somebody move in, and then 2 days later, she's like, the area is horrible. I can't stay here with my kids. Fine, fine. If I can't make it right in 5 to 10 minutes, and they're still giving me pushback, I don't care. You've been there 2, 3 days. Here's all your money back. Move out. Make it the way it was before you moved in. I'm going to give you your money back. We're going to tear up the lease. No problem. Okay, I don't want any issues like that. Okay, so yes, it does kind of, it's bad for us because then we have to start the process over again. But I mean, we got rid of the larger headache. All right, so I have countless examples of people being in there just a couple of days, issues at the lease signing. So it's getting far and few between, because I think we do screen quite heavily. Beth does a really nice job with the references, with the work managers, and especially to landlords. If they're not providing landlord numbers, and it's pretty funny how they say, oh, I forgot my landlord number. That was 2 years ago. I got tenants, they still call me after 5, 6 years. They never lose my number. Okay, so until we speak to 2 landlords, the application is going to sit.
Yeah.
You have to speak to 2 landlords.
Yes, and if a landlord is not returning my phone call, I'll put it back on the prospect and say, I'm waiting for your landlord. This is all I'm waiting for. And if they are a quality tenant who really wants that house, they will call the landlord and I'll get a return phone call. So I would never, ever rent to somebody if I'm not speaking to a landlord. And then going back to doing those reference calls, there are a couple tricks that I have used to pull information out of landlords about the tenant. So typically what I do is, hi Joe Schmo, I'm calling from Gallagher Properties, doing a landlord reference on John Smith. Can you tell me a little bit, or I say, do you own the property at 123 Dick Street? Yes, I do. Okay, and the names match, so I don't have to question that. And then I'll say, can you tell me a little bit about John Smith? And typically they'll go into, they have this amount of kids, nice people, they work a lot. And then I'll kind of ask the same question again, but in a different way. I'll say, can you tell me a little bit about John Smith as a tenant? So they already told me kind of the politically correct, fluffy stuff on the first question. So now this is where I get owners who will say, you know what? Yeah, they're nice, but they don't pay their rent. Yeah, you know what? They have parties all the time. They have 5 dogs that they keep outside. Because they've kind of used all of their information on the first question, they're kind of forced to tell you the truth on the second question. And then, we'll chit chat a little bit, and I always go by my gut feeling on that. Sometimes you just get a vibe that they're not telling you anything. And the last question that I typically ask is, did they fulfill their rental obligations? It's a very open-ended question.
Or did they fulfill their responsibility as a resident of your home?
Yep.
So, some of the questions come through here as far as what you can ask and what can't ask. We're not asking landlords, do they pay their rent? Landlords will tell you stuff. They'll tell you a bunch of stuff. And okay, thank you. But keep in mind to not violate the law, if you do your proper background check, and we'll get into credit score in a little bit, but when you look at the whole background check from the application to the home visit to everything you have, all that's going to come out anyway. So
Right.
if they're a poor tenant not paying their rent, you're going to find out anyway.
Right. So there was a question. I thought you can't ask those questions anymore. I didn't ask if they paid their rent. I didn't ask if they've ever gone to eviction. I didn't ask any of that stuff. I asked a very open-ended question, and that landlord can tell me what they want to tell me. But I'm just trying to pull information out without asking those questions. So that's just a little trick that I've learned, is just the open-ended questions, not yes or no answers. I hate having to send a piece of paper to apartment complexes where they check boxes, because you're never going to get information. So yes, you could absolutely, Andy just said in the chat, would you lease to this tenant again? Absolutely. A lot of people say they'd have to reapply.
Which drives me nuts.
It drives me
crazy.
crazy. Right.
Come on, if you'd rent to them again.
Right.
The complexes do that. They have to reapply. But again, talking to the smaller housing providers, it's easy to pick up on their cues. And even if if someone tells you, I'm not going to say anything other than I'll never rent to them again. If someone tells you that, why go any further?
Run.
Okay. Yeah. Keep doing your other due diligence. So then you have a nice negative background package, or if you're going to deny them, you have a lot of things in there to deny them. But we'll tell people that when they call in, well, I'll just say, hey, I'll never rent to this person again. I don't have to give away any specifics, but I think we make it clear. And we don't have to like the tenants in a sense. I mean, we don't want to deal with the aggressiveness and the entitlement, but as long as they fulfill their responsibilities, and we might rent to them again, for sure.
Beth
Now-
and Pat,
Yes.
did you mentioned something about if somebody's on public assistance, do you try to have a conversation with a caseworker, Section 8 or DHS
No.
as well in the screening?
No, I just get their budget sheet and make sure that it fits into the income criteria. But no, I don't talk to their
Because
caseworkers.
those caseworkers 9 times out of 10 won't tell you anything. You know.
Now, Margaret did say landlords will lie to get rid of their tenant. Absolutely, they will. However, if you're doing the landlord part of the screening is maybe 1/10 of the screening. If a landlord's lying to get rid of a tenant, you're going to pick up on those cues in the other 90% of the screening, whether it's on the credit report, whether it's on their other landlord reference, whether it's on an incomplete application, any of that stuff. Not to say that it's foolproof, but you also got to go by your gut. There's a lot of times I'll call a landlord and I'll say, I'm calling about Joe Schmo, and you can hear it in their voice, the agitation or the, what do you need to know? You know, that type of thing. So you can, it's kind of like, you know, you're talking to someone in person, you read their body language, you can hear the tone of voice. But like I said, you got to look at the full picture, not just what one person says.
I had a guy, I called in, I say, hey, can you tell me about so-and-so? And they're like, you want to know what's good about him? I said, yes. And the phone was silent. I wasn't picking up on it, but I'm like, hello. He goes, that's what's good about him. Click. So, you know, like I said, you just want to have a good conversation with them and get a good feel.
And a lot of times it's funny because especially when you call smaller landlords and you're calling about, you know, I'm screening somebody and it's their problem tenant. They want to vent. They want to vent. And I just let them vent. I'm not asking the questions. They're telling me what I need to know just by asking the open-ended question. So I do think that's very important to do that.
And we've had people where we deny them and then they're blowing up our phones, 10, 20 calls. I spent $20. Here's your $20 back. Go away. Okay. So yes, you're out the $20 for the credit report, but you got to weigh it all out. You know, when there's some crazies out there and it's not worth it, here's your $20. So
Another thing
Hey,
that
Beth and Pat,
yes.
what have you, where do you go to obtain the credit reports? And have you tried several different places and settled upon this? And final question with that, is it a tri-merge report?
Ours is all through our computer system we use, Rent Manager. So they use AmRent. So that is who runs our credit reports. So I have not shopped it around. It's through our system. It makes it super easy to pull. So unfortunately, I don't know that answer, Bob.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
yeah, we're pretty happy through Rent Manager. It's actually a nice printout in the credit report.
I think there were some other questions. There was something else I was just going to put in, but of course I forgot. Okay, so another question is, once you have selected an applicant, do you have a portal that they can pay their rent through, et cetera? Again, through our computer system, they can pay everything online. One thing that we do, which I believe is different from other places, is once I select an applicant and it's time for them to put down the security deposit, I want them to come in the office to put down the security deposit, because it gives us another face-to-face. We can pick up any cues on if they're going to be a problem. You know, if they say they're going to be there at 10 and they get there at 2 o'clock, I may think, you know, they show up, smell like weed, you know, they're drunk. We've had that before. So anytime you can get more people, the tenants in front of you, you just want to see the full package of what you're gonna get.
All right, so we're going to talk about the credit report a little bit.
Okay, credit report. Credit report is,
Awesome.
I know it's an expense, and especially if you're a small time landlord, you're going to spend probably more than the $20 fee to pull that information, but it's 100% worth it. For you to spend $30 on a credit check fee to save a $10,000 rehab in a year, totally worth it. For credit check, it obviously, like I said before, it will tell you all the addresses they've lived at or have been affiliated with. You can see how often they move. One thing that I find interesting is that they use, I'll see that they lived at one of the houses we managed 5 years ago. So I'll ask them about their experience there, even though we didn't manage it at the time. Or, you know, they may have rented from us 10 years ago. I don't remember the name, but I can pull up their payment history. They didn't put it as their last two places where they lived. So I wouldn't have known if I didn't have that credit report. It obviously shows you who they owe money to, how many times they've been late, things like that. Criminal activity we've already talked about, but it gives you the whole picture for sure.
And on the credit score, you don't really, to me, you don't really want to publicize if you're going to use a credit score. I'm not saying you can't. Some people are holding a threshold at 650. So anything under 650, you're denied, or anything under 600, you're denied. And it's our understanding and impression is if you're going to do that, you have to stay consistent with that. You can't make exceptions with that. And that's where there's some gray areas, because we know some people have very little credit because they're all cash. They might just have one credit card with a $500 balance or a $500 credit line, zero balance, and their credit score is 490, just simply because they don't have any credit. And when you do your full background check, nothing as far as credit worthiness or anything having to do with their responsibilities, them failing to fulfill their responsibilities, none of that stuff comes up. Okay, so if your threshold 600, you're gonna have to deny that person. Okay, especially people that went through divorce situations or bankruptcies. So they're just recovering, and what they do is they pay the rent all the time. But of course, their credit report could be 2 or 3 pages long. Okay, so you have to look at that. And again, you have to do and use that credit report what's best for you. Okay, the most alarming on there is the bad credit relating to their housing. Anything to do with their housing is a major red flags. But again, we just go from start to finish, from the application to all our background screening and the credit, and we make a decision. Okay.
So Beth and Pat, do you not then place much emphasis on the actual scoring because it could be very skewed to some of those situations?
I think it's just another indicator. I mean, we typically deal with lower income tenants. So their score could be low just simply because they don't have credit. And what we do, I don't think it's fair to disqualify somebody because they don't have credit. It's maybe their lifestyle, they pay everything in cash. So we just kind of look at the whole picture, kind of like what I said before is, you know, I'll take the landlord reference as everything is 10%. So I'll take the credit score as 10% and what's on the credit report is another 10% and look at the whole picture.
And then another indicator, and I don't know if you make people do this or not, but do you make them actually fill out like a budget sheet for you, you know, just so you can see if they're lying at all about their income and expenses?
You know, that's actually a good point. We don't make them fill out a budget sheet, but I do require all of the information. So I need all 4 weeks of pay stubs. I need the DSS budget sheet. Like I said prior, if you don't provide it, it's not equivalent. It's not relevant. One thing that Pat did mention to me yesterday when we were talking about this, which I thought was a good point, which I never would have thought to bring up, is people who apply for your housing, scan it and save it somewhere. And then when they apply a year later, just cross-reference those names, because they could have now lied on the second application. You denied them on the first based on, I don't know, let's say credit score. Second one, application, same person, the information is not matching up from the last time when you denied them. So it's just another tool to look at the full picture. Oh, I have tenants, I mean prospects I denied 3 months ago, and they're applying later thinking it's going to be a different story, because maybe they think I'm not cross-referencing, that I don't know that I denied them 3 months ago and they want to slip through the cracks. It's not happening. So
Yeah, I mean, you just, again, this part in general, we're all doers, you know, like I said, we find a house, we rehab it, but this is, and if you're not good in any segment of management, property management, have a team with you, pay for that. Stuff that I fall short in, which is quite a bit, I pay for that. You know, I've been doing rehabs in kitchens and so forth. I don't know anything about kitchens in a sense, other than the basic. I tend to do a lot of city type rehabs, but we're working on a couple rehabs that are close to $150,000 to $200,000. So that's a little different mindset, and we're doing more of a larger rehab. So just like this, I'm calling in people to help me. Yeah, I'm not an expert at that, so I definitely call in people. So when it comes to this, you have some legal involved. You definitely want to make sure you're covered. So something happens, you can pull something out 6 months later to say, yes, I denied a person for a few things. Okay. But definitely, we're having people that come back to us after a year or two, and they'll come back and they still owe us a large balance. And we'll tell them as soon as they pay that balance off, we'd be happy to receive their application again and see if we can rent to them again. But they have to pay off that balance.
Okay. Oh, I just lost my train of thought. But I think another thing is like Pat mentioned before, and I think I did too, is you can get the best deal on a property. You could get a $90,000 property for $55,000, and you think you just scored. And then you put somebody in there who doesn't pay your rent. You're in a moratorium, even if you weren't in a moratorium, and it takes you 5-6 months to get them out. That is not a good deal on a property anymore, simply because you didn't do your due diligence. And in my opinion, I think that is more important than finding the best deal on a house, is to do your due diligence, is who you're going to trust to live in that house.
Yeah, you know, another example of this is I had a package of 19 units sent to me, a bunch of singles and doubles. They're sent to me, and then some of the math was there as well. So I'm evaluating the package, and what is said in the narrative is that 2 are vacant out of the 19, and only 1 is paying. So look how awful that is. It's a large package, and so there's what, 16, 17 units, and just 1 is paying.
So, and I'll be more blunt than he is, but clearly that person did not do their due diligence with placing the right kind of tenants, which is probably leading to why they're selling their portfolio.
Yeah, and, you know, and our thing is we're pretty heavy in low income. We have stuff in the burbs as well, but we're probably 75% very low income that we service, and we're still close to 80% rent collection every month. You know, so knock on wood, it's not too bad. We put a lot of time and effort into it, but it can be done. It can be done. You can do well with the lower income properties under 60, under $50,000, but this is very, very important. Okay, very important.
And you know, at the end of January, we're at about 80%. Now, if I run my January numbers, we're probably about high 80s, 90%. So it does go up over time. And then I'm denying 9 out of 10 people right now.
Applicants,
Yeah.
9 out of 10 applicants, because now you're getting people that are kicked out, not for any reason other than them and their poor choices. And they're doing anything they can, lie, cheat, and steal, to get another place. And we've never denied more than 9 out of 10 applicants. I mean, it's crazy. So you gotta be careful.
And that applicant that you are, the 9 people that you are denying, that 1 person that you do take, they stick out like a diamond in a haystack. They just stick out like this is going to be a good person. And it's all because a lot of it just stems from, they gave me all the stuff that I wanted, even when I provide you a checklist from the beginning. So the responsibility factor is there to start with.
Hey, Pat and Beth, can you elaborate any more on, your collection numbers are just phenomenal. I had a talk with Carl Weeks a couple of weeks ago, and he was at 60%, 40% people not paying. We've been maybe consistently at 30% to 25, 30%. And I haven't seen any stats on the norm for the state, but I know it was hovering around 75%. Just I'm always intrigued because it seems like you guys always have some new tips and tricks to offer, or ideas in this area. Any new thoughts on that and what's working or not working? Or
I think it's just constant communication. I mean, if we talk to somebody and they say they're going to pay on the 5th, if we don't get it and we check our Dropbox on the 6th and it's not in there, you bet your butt they're getting a text message, they're getting a phone call, they're getting an email. I think follow-up is huge. During the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, I was okay on texting tenants. Now, 100% the first form of communication is texting. Not only because it's a paper trail, but you can refer back to it. And people are more apt to tell you, not make up stories through texting. I do like that a lot. We are giving tenants every piece of information about the rental assistance out there. So communication is definitely key. We also, if someone's not communicating, I'm sending a guy over to knock on the door to do a vacancy check. And they don't like that when you show up. So when you do that the first time, next month when they don't pay, they don't want you to just show up. So they're going to communicate.
And that's the big thing, Bob, is we have a person full-time in the office, 40 hours a week. And the majority is people who are late. People have issues and problems. And so, of course, we have all the rental assistance programs down really good. And it does cost you an expense to have a person dedicated to this, but we have large, we're over 500 tenants. So we have the volume for it. And, when we're over 80, 85% rent collection, that may take 3 months to get our January rent. Okay. But we work and push as much as we can. So it's not for everybody. So be careful your niche, make sure it's your niche. Some people are like, oh, these houses are $40,000. I want 10 of them. Well, again, there's a reason why they're $40,000 houses. And this is a big part of it, because if you have your tenant pool mismanages their lives, you got to take the best out of that person. Okay. And we've had some really bad ones. And then we've had some fantastic people that, yes, they're low income, very low income, but fantastic tenants. So when you do that, another thing is kind of reward your tenants. I mean, we do every new tenant that we have, we give them a gift basket as a welcoming gift to being part of our team. And it's something that's maybe $15, $20 a basket, but it's a variety of laundry stuff, clothes basket, a bunch of knickknacks. And just even that, the tenants are like, oh my gosh, this is nice. And we send birthday cards to everybody. So we have someone in charge to send birthday cards. So it's just, I don't know, just stuff like that. I don't know if that's why we have a better collection rate than some others. I have no idea, but everybody wants to be heard. They have a voice. And, the common thing to do when tenants are behind is they'll blame it on repairs not being done. They'll blame it on this. But once you weed through that, I want some substance. What's going on here? Just be honest. If you're not going to pay me, just tell me you're not going to pay me. That's all, right? And then I always use the whole, I'm very disappointed in you, very disappointed that you're taking advantage of private housing. And even if your rent's $800 and you can't even send me $400, I mean, but you're staying in private housing, I mean, how does that make you feel, right? So there's some psychology you can play as well, but it is time consuming. So you definitely, again, from the start, you want the right person. This doesn't happen overnight. Beth and I have been doing this a long time. And the beauty of it is we have still a lot more to learn. Okay, so that's why we love it so much, but it can be challenging at times. The other day, I was at a house to take care of a spider web in between kitchen cabinets. So she had no idea what that was. And, you know, it's not hygienic. And so I took care of the spider web. You know, I didn't call her crazy wacko, but I mean, again, you just want to be careful what you say, what you do. You don't want to get walked on, but you want to be consistent. That's the big thing, is be very consistent.
You
There's a
guys conduct periodic surveys with your residents, and if so, has that changed at all over the pandemic?
We have somebody who calls. So if we're in for a repair last week, we do have somebody who calls the following week to make sure they're satisfied with the repair. How is the tech? Was he or she pleasant? Is everything all set? Is it still leaking? So that's pretty much the only really survey that we do.
It's funny because if we've done surveys in the past, and blanket surveys, and the people who owe you rent, you guys are terrible. Blah, blah, blah. The people that are up to date with rent, you know, everything's pretty good, you know. So, but surveys aren't a bad idea.
There's a couple questions in the side. So how are you denying them? Are you sending a letter with the explanation? Yes. So we have a blanket letter and we just check the boxes, whether unable to verify income, they don't meet our income requirements, income is inefficient, no call, no show for scheduled appointments. Which
Just real quick on income though, we do 30%. Okay, so if
Yeah.
rent's 800, they have to make 2,400.
Right. If they don't have 2 landlord references, I'm denying based on 2 landlord references. So kind of like when I talk to the landlords, I try and keep it as vague as possible. But we do send a letter. Also, another thing is if I'm getting a text message or a phone call every day from an applicant that screams desperate, and that's probably the biggest, the red flag is on fire at that point. So that's typically another thing to look out for. A couple more questions. Does payment require anything in particular? I'm not sure about AmRent's, what they require. I think because we have a relationship with our program, they accepted us, but I think there are, if I remember correctly, you do have to prove that you are a legitimate business. You're just not somebody pulling a credit report on a friend or something like that.
I'll do this one. And then the question from Leslie says, do you do inspections? We used to do quarterly inspections called courtesy checks prior to COVID. So during COVID, we're not doing those courtesy checks. So I'm a little disappointed in that because we're already having some maintenance issues that we would have caught on those courtesy checks. But because of what's going on right now, we're not in the houses doing that. But when we are there doing repairs, my guys will take an extra 5-10 minutes to check furnace filters and health and safety issues. They'll use that time to do a check. But my thing is, I'm thinking once this opens up again and we start doing these checks, I've already told landlords, I do quarterly emails to all my landlords that are with me, all my owners that are with me. And I do quarterly checks, and I told them, be prepared when this opens up and we start doing some checks, there's going to be some issues.
Well, you're actually having the girls do self-serve courtesy checks. I mean,
yeah.
So we'll send a letter, kind of like do a self-service thing, saying go down and, you know, are there any faucets leaking? Check A, B, and C, and let us know if you have any of those. It's kind of like a self-serving thing. We don't get many of those back, but
everything's great. So, but yeah, you know, that's what I miss, not doing those inspections. What else? Any questions on what we talked about? The application questions, background checks, making a visit to the property, talk to the neighbors, ask the neighbors. You know, of course, you're not going to write anything down in front of a neighbor. They're not going to talk to you. But also, I love talking to neighbors because when I'm in a nice house and I feel a good vibe, I'm trying to recruit them to come over with us. So a lot can happen. There's a lot of good. We've talked to owners for checks, and they've joined our group, and then we'll take over their properties. So there's a lot of networking you can do, make new friends. We've talked to some landlords, they have 20 or 30 properties, and I'll have them, you know, we keep in touch. So we'd be happy to share some ideas.
Question says, how do you feel about having a tenant get their own credit check through sites? Legally, you have to accept it. I'm fine with that as long as it's a legitimate site.
Yeah, be careful of fraud.
Yeah, but like I said, look at the full picture before.
Mhm.
Regarding asking for prior landlord references, what do you do with the person who only had one previous landlord because before that they were living with parents or another relative?
I'll probably require a cosigner for sure. And do a little bit more of a background. I mean, my background check is pretty thorough, but I'll probably dig a little deeper. Social media is a tool you can look at. But I would definitely require a cosigner, especially if it's their first, second, even third apartment sometimes.
Great, thank you.
And you're going to see when people start selling, it's going to be because tenants aren't paying, right? So it's not that our prices are crazy. Yeah, our prices have went up, but I've been looking at different parts of the country and we're still very low compared to different parts of the country. So, but a lot of times, and I think Colleen can probably verify, the frustrations of owners going to Colleen to sell, they're not making their rent. That's probably number one.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Now back to the question about the freecreditreport.com. I have never had anybody come to me and say, here's my credit report. So I know legally you have to accept it. I do like Andy's comments on there saying that it should be within 30 days. Absolutely, I agree. But I've never had someone bring me their own credit report. Any other questions at all?
All right, yeah. Yeah, any general questions before we go with tenants or any frustrations you're having? Oh, go ahead, Elliot.
I have a general question about duplexes with a shared driveway. For years, I've used a clause in my lease that the shared driveway, that the driveway is a shared resource, that the tenants of a duplex have to share the driveway. Most recently, I'm having disputes between tenants at a duplex about sharing the driveway. I'd like to hear what other landlords are doing when they have a duplex with a shared driveway.
We're all adults. They should talk to each other and figure it out. This does come up a lot with plowing because one tenant's shoveling, the other one's not, but they're both reaping the benefits. I think that's something you have to come up with. I've heard that if it's a duplex, the person who's lived there, once one tenant vacates, you say, nope, driveway is only for the person who lives there, and that kind of acts as the problem. But we do have tenants who get a little combative with each other over driveway use, more so during COVID, I think, because people are just stressed out. And we just say, listen, it's a shared driveway. I can take rights away from both of you, so figure it out.
Yeah, and we've had people recently, they owe us quite a bit of money and my furnace doesn't work. I don't have any hot water. I go, man, that's too bad. You better call somebody and then we'll take it off the rent. And then we start discussing, so yeah, I use that a lot for the right cases, the right people. And one of them, she paid over $2,000 in back rent because I said, you know what, you've been there for 6 months. The owner would love to fix it, but gosh, 6 months no rent. We can't put a hot water tank in. And sure enough, made a $2,000 payment, and we had a good talk. So use that. And see where it gets you. And yes, ultimately, are you going to have to do the repair? Yes, ultimately, you're going to have to do the repair. But I mean, that's a good chance when a tenant's been, not responding to you and they call for a problem. It's like, thank you. Now you got their attention because they need you. So that's a good time for you to say, listen, this is the deal. All
Hey,
right.
Kat, I did put in the chat those SBA sites just for everybody, so they have it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Free money, get it. All right. Anything else going on?
Yeah, excuse me, do you hear me, Jamal?
Hi.
Do you hear me?
I can.
Hi,
Yeah.
I have been listening, so I'm very beginning of this issue. I'm trying to grow, but mostly I worry about I'm not very familiar with this background check. I'm already having some problem with some tenants, and I have very few property. I'm just beginner. Two questions I have is, one, do you do help with inspection, and how much that will be? Not inspection, I mean for background check. Another one is one tenant lived 6 months without payment and just took off and just left house a mess. How do you pursue that, and how do you find where they are? They try to hide probably right now.
Well, the first thing, when a tenant leaves and they owe you 6 months, they did you a big favor. So get in that house. We have alarms that we put in all our vacant houses. Change the locks, you name it, RG&E, because you don't want the pipes to freeze, so forth. When the courts open up, you can always pursue small claims action. Okay, we started a few and got delayed, but you can always do small claims. You have, I think you have a couple of years to do small claims.
One thing I want to add with that tenant who just left you, I would call them and say, I need to address your security deposit. Can I have your forwarding address? Then you use that forwarding address in your small claims court filing. So,
But if they owe you a lot of money, they don't care about this, their security deposit.
but at least you're getting the address to
They
find
all
them.
Yeah,
They
so
try
just
to hide actually.
yeah, you might have
They
to.
try to hide. I'm looking into what way of pursuing it. Do like maybe hiring the private detective or something like that. Is it, how much it's gonna cost? Is it possible? They're not gonna answer me for the security deposit. I think they owe me over like $4,000.
Yeah, you can use the city marshal, and there's some attorneys, local attorneys, that go after people too. And then you can
Okay,
do small
that's
claims.
good idea.
Yep.
What about the? If I ask you, those of you who manage huge property, you're talking a lot of background check, and I need help with that. And some times ago, a year ago, I turned over to management, someone, a small person, management. I had very bad experience. I could manage myself, but I need help with some area like background check and good tenants. Otherwise, I have good way of dealing with the people. So I could deal with the tenant, but I need a background check, a good background check. If I pay for how much it's gonna cost me, and I need help with that, please.
Yeah, we stopped. We were doing some a la carte services with some landlords, kind of partnering with them, and we found that with
Yeah.
our paperwork involved and with their paperwork, and it just wasn't working. It was really time consuming to make a couple $100. So with us, if we're gonna run a property and do those services, it has to be all ours. We'll run the property 100% for you as your property manager. But unfortunately, we don't offer services like that unless we have your property under management.
Now, Michelle did just say in the chat that you can try a real estate company that specializes in rentals. They may place a tenant for you.
Be careful.
Yeah, I don't know how quality it would be, but
If real estate selling houses is my number one, but I do this on the side, are you going to get that service? You know, maybe they're fantastic, but I would just be careful on
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to join us this morning. I know we're all busy, but I do appreciate the questions you had in the chat room. And any questions that you want to follow up with later on, feel free to track us down, send us an email. We'd be happy to send you our suggestions. And because this is so sensitive, this topic, you definitely want to run it by an attorney, run it by some trusted others. And then once you get a solid footprint, have a good procedure and a good policy in place and stick to that. Okay. And that's why we're kind of, as far as a set credit score, I don't really like a set credit score. Okay. Because again, there's always exceptions, but if you're going to make an exception, you want to make sure you're all set and it's not going to come back at you. Okay. Where you give preferential treatment to one or not the other.
yeah, you want to look at the full picture for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, what the others don't understand is this is the most challenging part of our business. Okay, because I think we're all in this to help people. And when you meet a good applicant and things are looking good and then you turn them away, you just don't want any repercussions come back at you. We've had a few applicants that were denied, try to come back at us for different reasons. And I think because we have a good policy in place, it didn't go anywhere. So just be very, very careful. Not to be scared, but just be careful. And again, if you're not strong in this, you better have someone else do it. Okay, because a couple of mistakes could really get you in a lot of trouble. All right. So with that said, hopefully we'll see everybody later tonight at the meeting. But anything else before we go? Susan, anything at all?
Thank you again, Pat and Beth. Outstanding information.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And,
It's good seeing everybody. So, all right, guys, best of luck. We're almost through this. So, all right, have a good day, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.